Fingers crossed. Yes, as the litigator in the team, I always get to talk about the really cheerful subjects at these talks. So I'm talking about the end. It's over, and you think that you've said goodbye to your agent, but that's not necessarily so. How an agency comes to an end has a direct impact on what the agent could be entitled to, and conversely, obviously, what the principal is exposed to. Up there are the main provisions that you really need to think about, but generally it will be the last one, which is Regulation 17, either compensation or indemnity, which involves the biggest sum of money. Liability for the first three is not dependent on how you part ways with the agents, although having listened to Emma, everybody of course will be excluding Regulation 8 as soon as they get back to their office. But for the final two payments, the reason why the agency has come to an end really does matter. Now, broadly, agencies come to an end in three ways. If anybody has any other ideas, obviously let me know afterwards. But skipping forward, Regulation 18 sets out the exclusions, and it can act as a get-out-of-jail-free card for either a principal or an agent if you're terminating in the right way for the right reason. If an agent hasn't done anything wrong, then it is going to be very difficult for a principal to terminate without any exposure to that agent. Effectively, what you're trying to do is shove a square peg into a very round hole, and you're probably not going to get anywhere in the long run. All you're going to have is an agent that you've said goodbye to who is very cheesed off with you. And retirement is a similar situation. Provided an agent can show that they can reasonably rely on their age, infirmity or illness, then they can still terminate the agreement themselves and make a claim from you. And in our experience, this comes as quite a big shock to principals when they first hear it or when they receive the claim. There's only one reported case on age which was decided before the default retirement age was abolished, but our view generally is that if you're dealing with an agent who's around 60, then you are going to face an uphill struggle to say that that agent should continue. There are no reported cases on infirmity or illness, but in our view, you're probably going to know when it's not reasonable to make somebody continue. But for both fault and retirements, you may ultimately be better just to bite the bullet and think, we are going to have to pay something here, let's negotiate and try and get a clean break with the agent, rather than having to fight after you've said goodbye. It's not going to be about whether you're paying, it's going to be about how much you're paying. And if you can have a pragmatic discussion, you may end up with a better end result, and you're certainly going to pay a lot less money to people like us, in addition to the money that you're going to have to pay to the agent. There is a regulation that says that any agreements that are reached before an agency is terminated are invalid. However, with the right timing, you reach an agreement in principle, and then the agent resigns, and then they sign the settlement letter, you're probably going to be okay. And if someone's got a payment in front of them, they're unlikely to walk away from that because they think that they can do better. It's quite tempting just to have a nice clean break. Where there are issues with the agents, then the position is quite different. As Regulation 18 says up there, if the agency has been terminated for a breach, then the position can be very different. It can either be a breach of the written contract, which, as Emma's just said, you are in a much better position if you have a very, very long clause setting out all the duties of the agent, because you'll have a lot more to look at when you are thinking about terminating the agent. But if the contract's not been reduced to writing, then you can still rely on the statutory duties in the regulations, and there are also common law duties, such as duty of good faith, duty of fidelity. So all is not lost if you don't have a written contract. So what kind of a breach are you looking for? Well, your breach has to be material. Now, what does material mean? In real terms, it means something that's important, something that you genuinely care about, something that goes to the heart of your contract. Types of breaches that I would consider to be material: lying to the principal, acting for competitors without telling the principal that you're acting for competitors, There was a case where the agent called the principal a git. That was considered to be material. There was another case where the agent threatened to shove an iPack, which I think was the precursor to an iPad, somewhere that sounded very uncomfortable. That was a good reason for termination. It's things of that nature. Non-material breaches, the odd error on an order is really not going to be enough. Every now and then you leave a message and they don't call you back. We had a case where someone was trying to rely upon a poor presentation at a sales meeting as being a reason for termination. It just doesn't cut it. A sufficient number of non-material breaches, if they're all added together, could ultimately be a material breach, and it is often referred to as a straw that broke the camel's back, but it is very much, it's a factual situation. Now, if you're terminating for breach, it sounds very straightforward, but say that you are. If you terminate the agent at a meeting, follow up the meeting with a letter recording what was said and why you parted company with the agent. Once you've done it, you can't add in further things, so it really is worth thinking very carefully about exactly why you want to see the back of your agent. Now, the final thing is that timing is key. Once an agent commits a breach, then the clock starts running. As a principal, you've got the choice to accept the breach and say that the contract's at an end, but if you wait for too long, then you lose your right to do anything. It's referred to in law as affirming the contract. And if you act too late and terminate on a breach where you haven't got yourself together quickly enough, then actually you haven't made your situation better, you've in fact made the situation a lot worse. In terms of how long you actually have, it's a reasonable period of time. How long is a reasonable period of time? Well, again, it will always depend on the circumstances. As a rule of thumb, you have enough time to think about what's happened and to take advice. But it really does link back to the idea of the breach that you're relying on being material. If something has gone to the heart of your contract and killed it, you really don't need a couple of months to think about how you feel about it. You know that you want to see the end of the agency. And as a final kind of word of warning, it's usually not a surprise to either party when the agency comes to an end. People usually know that the writing is on the wall, and in that situation, while you're looking to terminate an agent, you really have to be thinking about being whiter than white. Otherwise, you could suddenly find that something you've done is accepted by them as a breach of the agency, and you're in the position where you're actually fighting from a position of weakness when you could have been acting from a position of strength.